Hello and welcome back. I am so excited to talk about this topic today. This is one of my favorite topics when it comes to talking about Italy and Calabria, of course, but also because it's so much a part of my love for linguistics. It's one of the reasons why I love living in Calabria so much. This is such a linguistically diverse region. I think that all of Italy in general is quite linguistically diverse. There are many dialects throughout the entire peninsula of Italy. However, within Calabria and in other parts of the south as well, we see a lot of really interesting linguistic qualities when it comes to the regional dialects. So let's get into it. Now, first and foremost, when we talk about Calabrian dialects, we have a tendency to sort of group all of these languages together. And really, there are so many different kinds of Calabrian dialects. Something that's really important to understand about all of these different dialects within Calabria is that they vary a lot from town to town and village to village. So to give you a really practical example, I know a lot of people in Vibo Valentia. That's where I live most of the time. I have some friends that are from Tropea, for example, which is part of Vibo Valentia, and other friends that are from Pargelia, which this is very close, okay? This is maybe a 10-minute drive. You could even probably walk there if you were up for it. And even between these two places, these places are very close together geographically, there are some significant differences in the words that are used between these two different towns. So why is this topic important in the first place? First and foremost, I will say that I don't speak any Calabrese dialects. I do speak Italian and I understand it very well. But I will say that it's quite challenging to get along in Calabria if you don't at least speak Italian, if not able to also understand some of the dialect. Luckily for me, I do understand quite a bit of the dialects, especially within the Vibonese region, just because that's where I spend most of my time. So I've sort of gotten used to listening to these dialects and I can understand quite a bit. I would say, depending on where a person is from, maybe even like 80% of what they're talking about. It's really useful to know the dialects because a lot of people don't actually speak standard Italian, if that's even a thing. Many people within the entire region of Calabria speak their local dialects. You can speak to them in Italian and then they respond to you in their dialect. So if you're able to understand, then it goes a long way. But if you're not able to understand any of the dialect, it can be really challenging. So something that's important to understand and know is that within Calabria, we have 5 different provinces. So this is Cosenza, Crotone, Catanzaro, Vibo Valentia, and Reggio Calabria. Now within each of these provinces, there are different linguistical tendencies, and there are other languages that have come into those dialects that have certainly influenced different words, intonation, maybe even cadence of the language. So for simplicity's sake, today I'm going to sort of divide this into 3 main regions, okay? We have sort of the northern dialects, the central dialects, and then the southern dialects, and I'll get into what all of that actually looks like later on. So let's go region by region, okay? Let's talk about the northern dialects. These are generally known as the Cosentino dialects. In my opinion, and this is partially because I do not speak any of these dialects, it sounds a lot to me like Napoletano. I haven't spent much time in that province, although my family is from Verbicaro, Cosenza. I've only been there for just a matter of a few hours, and I've done a couple day trips up to Cosenza before, so I'm not really familiar with that dialect, and I wouldn't be able to understand most of it if it were spoken to me, but I am able to identify it when I hear it. A lot of the dialects in this area have a lot of influences from French and Arboresh. Now, the central dialects are made up of the provinces of primarily Vibo Valentia and Catanzaro. These are the dialects that are most familiar to me just because that's the area that I live in, that's where I spend most of my time. You will hear a lot of Greek-sounding words in these particular dialects. There are also a lot of French words that have made their way into the language. For example, and I'm going to totally butcher this because I don't speak French, but the word andou, I think is how you say it, is commonly known in Calabrese as nuia, okay? This is a very typical pork-based, I would say it's almost like a pate kind of thing. It's delicious. If you come to Calabria, you need to try it. But this is just a simple example of how some words from other languages have come into play into these local dialects. I also find that if you know some Spanish, it's pretty easy to understand some of the local dialect, although it won't get you very far. Now, the southern dialects are primarily spoken in, of course, Reggio Calabria and maybe even parts of Crotone. I'm able to understand quite a bit of these dialects, although I will say that to my ear they sound very similar to the Sicilian dialects. Again, here we have a really heavy influence of Greek, so in that way it's very similar to the sort of central dialects. But I also hear a significant influence of Arabic and some Spanish in these dialects as well. So a little bit of advice, if you decide to come to Calabria and you do speak Italian, what I will say is that, of course, speaking standard Italian will get you pretty far. The problem is that you're not going to hear a lot of standard Italian, right? You're going to hear mostly dialects. So that listening practice that's really crucial for you to actually pick up a language and start integrating it is going to be a little bit difficult, especially if you're in a social setting with lots of people and everybody speaking their dialects. It's a very intense experience and it takes some getting used to. A common tendency that I've heard, especially from Italians in other regions, is that speaking local dialects is seen as kind of maybe low class. It seems like a classist issue in a lot of ways, which is quite sad because linguistic diversity is so important for social identity and of course for culture, right? I think it's really important to preserve these local languages. I do think that over time, they're going to become more and more scarce, especially because this is not something that's taught in school. And generally, these dialects are not even written languages. You can't search them on Google Translate, for example, or get a, Vibonese dialect reading book. From a linguistic perspective, I find this to be very important. It's very important to preserve language because preserving language preserves culture. If you speak any of the local dialects that I mentioned today in this video, you should be very proud of that. You're preserving a part of your culture, a part of your identity, and it's something that's really important. If you enjoyed this video today, please like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you next time.